Hey everyone, welcome back to the Engineering Success Podcast. This is your host Himanshu. Today we have a special guest, Alper, the head of platform engineering at Choco, a fast growing food tech startup based in Berlin. Alper has an incredibly diverse background from co founding a game development studio to leading platform engineering teams that focus on scalability, developer efficiency, and cost optimization. In this episode, we dive into Alper's journey from Amsterdam to Berlin, his insights on leadership, optimizing developer experience, and how he balances professional challenges with personal life as a parent. If you're curious about platform engineering, team management, or simply looking for leadership inspiration, this episode is for you. Let's jump right into it with Alper. Alper, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Himanshu. Nice
I
to
was
be here. A lot of stuff happening in Berlin always, and I think it's been a great ride being in technology in Berlin. I moved here specifically from Amsterdam
Mhm.
when there wasn't that much going on there, and Berlin seemed to be the place to be. And I think Amsterdam has caught up a lot, but not sure if it's competitive in a different way. Amsterdam technology is also pretty buzzing right now, but Berlin is still kind of special.
What's the difference?
The difference, I think, I haven't really been deep into the Amsterdam tech scene. There's a couple of really big players in Booking, Katawiki. There's a couple of very large companies there. I think the Netherlands is more commerce driven and less industry driven in a lot of ways. Germany has a bigger foundation of big industry, shaping the basis of what technology means in Germany. In Germany, there's more of a division between local startups and international startups, technology companies for the German market and technology companies that aim to have a global or European reach. And in the Netherlands, I think every company has to be global from the beginning because the Netherlands isn't the market. It's too small anyway. But that also creates a different kind of company.
Yeah.
I think Amsterdam was a really good pool of talent these days. A lot of people find it a really nice place to live. But I can't really speak about Amsterdam at the moment. I do know Berlin, where I'm at right now, drew a lot of people in because of very affordable living, which is still Europe-wise quite affordable. So you get very deep talent benches for a lot of technology. And I think that's not always possible in every European major city to hire locally for those roles. For instance, in my current role at Choco, the food tech startup, I'm not speaking for Choco here, but to contextualize what I'm doing, we are in office several days a week. In many places in Europe, and also for us, it can be a challenge to hire for that, even because a lot of companies have gone quite remote.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of companies still have in-office presence required. So it's always kind of a balance and filters your hiring pool quite definitively to say you have to be in Berlin in the office so many days a week, every week. And I think it's not necessarily a negative filter,
Okay.
but yeah.
I think it also has a lot to do with what stage are you in. I see many companies, many startups in the early days, you definitely want to be together. But then as you scale, sometimes you take decision of being remote or hybrid. For you, since it's most of the days in office, how do you think that helps, or how is it better than not being in office or working remotely?
I'm just discussing with a new person here. And onboarding mean like when you're in office, it's totally different. It's the difference between being a head on a screen and a physical person. I used to be working very remotely with a team, a boutique scale, and I know what you need to do to bridge those gaps. But end of the day, if you're a hybrid, you might be the one remote person of everybody. That could be annoying. If you're a fully remote team, then everybody is kind of like a face on a screen. It requires an investment from the company, culturally, but also resource-wise, like physical trips, getting on sites, that kind of stuff. But also from the employees themselves. So being remote requires everybody to put more effort in things that are not really necessary if you're in the office regularly, like doing stuff together, having a coffee or a lunch together. That goes a long way and it papers over so many gaps that might otherwise arise. And I think in a fully remote company, either you accept those gaps or you accept that you have to expend like twice or three times the effort to close over those gaps. And I think that's a trade-off.
When you're remote, I might have a specific thing and I would only reach out to you with that specific and you answer it and it's done. But when
Yeah.
you're in person, the scope of the conversation becomes much larger.
Yeah, I mean, as a leader, a large part of my job is going around the office, talking to people and filling in both the immediate needs, but also creating the rapport to fill in future needs, right? Never know what comes up. And if people have to make a meeting invite to get something discussed, that is a hurdle. And not every request that they have may meet that hurdle. So you're losing something in that filter where people
Yeah.
are like, I would like to discuss this with this person, but don't want to slack them. So yeah, I think you gain a lot of stuff, but you also lose a lot of stuff. It's always a trade-off.
Yeah, every system has its own pros and cons. Alper, for the next few minutes, I want to dive deeper into your experience from a college to being head of platform at Choco. I saw you worked into community, then content quality, and with several companies. Would want to dive deeper into it, but from the aspect of when you moved from A to B, what was new for you when you climbed up the ladder? What were those skills, or what surprised you when you were climbing up the ladder?
I wouldn't call it climbing up the ladder, really. I think it's just a bunch of career moves. And I think it's important to stay fresh, to keep resetting, to keep figuring out what the next thing is. I moved from running my own studio with a friend to doing backend engineering, to doing iOS engineering, and then at some point going into totally different fields doing team leadership. And I think all of those things offer you places and ways that you can show leadership. The core philosophy is that leadership comes from everybody in the organization, and you don't have to be a manager to be leading. If people can get their stuff done without that, that's great. My first serious experience was in the studio making games with groups of freelancers. We didn't have all of this standard management, right? We didn't have one-on-ones. We did have like stand-ups and scrum-based workflows, but you really rely on the quality of the people you have working and that everybody is very mission aligned because it's freelance work. It's a relatively limited engagement where people have to give a lot and they're compensated accordingly. And then it's over. It becomes easier for people to give a huge amount of input and to make sure that it works well. If it doesn't work well, you don't invite those people to collaborate on the next project. That's your easiest way of performance management. If during a project somebody doesn't deliver, that has also happened, of course. It can be very painful because in limited freelance engagements, you depend on everybody to supply their part.
Yeah.
If one person is short, you have to like switch them out during the project, which you preferably wouldn't do, or you have to intensively discuss how it's supposed to work, what are the gaps, and how to close those. There can be some long days of conversations to make sure that happens. You always have very strong recourse in those situations. Every role was different, and leadership was always there in different ways, like community leading, leading a studio. And even when I went for iOS engineering or backend engineering, there's always stuff you can pick up. That's also what I welcome from my team. I want my team members to trade on my position from the very get-go. We as a team have strategic objectives. You can use that to do stuff. I prefer that not everything goes through me as like a pyramid. I prefer that things flow. After university, I went freelance. Then I joined a game design development studio where we did games. So that's a discrete part of my life. Game development, mobile game development. Then I moved to Berlin and started working in Berlin startups as an engineer. Got to see multiple companies from the inside and out, what is possible to do in Berlin, the level of engineering and product. After a couple of years, I felt I could do leadership better than what I've seen in some cases. You mirror yourself to both positive and negative examples. I need to do it like this person, and I definitely don't want to do it like this person I used to work with. I was able to make the jump to team lead, manager, and head of engineering. And now I'm at this company as an engineering manager for platform, which is long enough to be its own chapter. It's kind of a hype word right now. And I didn't do much in DevOps before I joined this company. So it has been a learning journey for me. I always DevOps from a software engineering perspective. I'm a software engineer at heart, not like a SRE engineer. But I think that's healthy as well, because I know platform engineering is difficult to define and it's always different. It's very much under push and pull from different sides. But fundamentally, it is a supporting function for software engineering. So I think software engineering and software delivery need to be front and center of any platform initiative. There can be platform teams which are less delivery oriented, for instance, where it's more about security or control and making sure things are stable. But delivery orientation always been a core part of how we worked.
Would it be right to say that platform engineering is more product oriented? I wouldn't call it product management, but there's more of a product aspect because the way people look at platform engineering is creating that level of visibility for software teams to see how much work is being done, different aspects of work and various aspects of the SDLC. It's about creating visibility for their team, more like a support function to software engineering, which is the core.
It's a big discussion whether platform engineers need product managers or not. Ideally, sure, you would have a product manager. In our setup, I am effectively product delivery manager, product ops manager, maybe even. The platform is not always well defined. In our case, it's adaptations of AWS primitives and ways and code to help engineers use that productively. A combination of practices, documentation, and also code, like APIs and infrastructure things that we create. Is very difficult, and it's probably always will be somebody from an engineering background who does product management at that level. In our setup, I'm accepting the level of work from everybody and I look at what is being done and the crucial priorities. For those priorities, I depend on my leadership and our very senior engineers in the different teams. Effectively do a kind of product ownership. They give us deep insight, what is necessary for the teams and what connects with their day-to-day development workflow. Because oftentimes they are in the teams themselves or were in the teams very recently. And that is a level of insight that we are still translating into the individual members of my team, who also work with team members, but are working more at the ground level. Our staff and other senior engineers in the organization are working at a high level to really see what the business priority is, what different architectural developments are that we're going to go for. So in that way, we patch together a product management process of saying what is the most important thing we can do right now, what are our top priorities, and how do we connect on those.
Yeah, so I think that alignment with business necessities or business requirements is something which happens to be a key element of a platform.
Our business requirements for a platform team are reliability. We make sure that teams can operate their services in a reliable and that our infrastructure is reliable. But fundamentally, the teams operate their own services. The developer experience needs to be good enough that teams can deliver at velocity. I think that's also probably very similar to many for many teams. And cost. So changes in the world, a company is more cost sensitive. And whether in the old days, teams would spend on Amazon or wherever and just buy every possible service that they could, that is not really the case anymore. And everybody has to be fiscally more prudent and tighter on how things go. And I think that's natural and healthy.
So you spoke about two very important elements, developer experience and the cost capitalization part of it. We do see these conversations coming up more so than before. In your experience, you spent around 2 decades in engineering. When we talk about developer experience, what exactly are we talking about? What does it mean?
That's the most difficult question you could ask me right now. What does developer experience mean? I think you need to make it easy for yourself. In our case, it means taking standard open source things and keeping them as standard and straightforward as possible. It's very possible to take a component or a framework, and then it goes through some kind of platform mill, like a sausage mill. They add lots of bells and whistles and every possible security thing. And at the end of the day, you get something not usable anymore. So if you go to the framework deployment tutorial, it looks very straightforward. But then if you actually try to use it, it's just tears. The aim of developer experience is to keep things simple. I think that's our goal, to make things not too different from the way they are done in industry. At web application development level, we are not doing anything new. It has to be standard, and whatever reasons we have to make it more complicated need to be checked. And that's kind of like very tempting for a lot of teams to overcomplicate, come up with a bazillion great reasons and why it has to be this way. You have to jump through 5 hoops to deploy it. But at the end of the day, if all the good excuses and the good reasons in the world don't get me out of a bad outcome. And if the outcome is bad, then it's bad. And I think that's where leadership comes in. from the top level down and from everybody in our organization to do that checking and connecting with reality. If you lose a connection with the reality of the day-to-day, it's easy to go off 6 months, develop something random, and then deploy it on engineers who don't want. Then you get a disaster, impact your velocity and lose credibility and capital. And that's not something that I think is necessary or that you would want to have. In certain cases, it makes sense to build a custom thing, maybe for very limited companies in very limited contexts. But in most situations, we would like things to be good and stay good and don't overcomplicate it. Don't reinvent the wheel. All those good things.
So, as head of platform, continuing on this conversation around DevEx, the structure seems like there is a manager of managers, and then there are managers, and then there are devs. How does the definition of developer experience change at different levels? And EM, how is he looking at it? And then if you're manager of managers, how are you looking at it? What are the aspects that you want to talk about, or what do you want to keep an eye on?
Our connections are very direct. We're just looking at, can our teams develop?
Yeah.
Can teams with greenfield services, can they get them off the ground quickly? How quickly can they iterate? And for legacy services, how quickly can we move them towards the future? Those are the core elements. Even relatively flat and simple setup, there's still too much context to go around. You have to stay simple, or otherwise it will be totally impossible. We look at things like flow metrics and reliability metrics just to see how things are going. And I think you can overcomplicate that. I think it's relatively straightforward to keep an eye on the organization and feel like if things are going in the right direction or not. Flow of development, flow of features that are coming out, reliability, how many incidents do we have? Do changes result in outages too regularly? Those are things that you can have. You don't even have to measure those things, even though we do, but you will know whether you're doing okay or not. And I think that's a scale where you would have to go over larger parts of the organization and create reporting over multiple teams and multiple orgs to see how we're doing. I think that may just be an anti-pattern in and of itself. You talked about smaller teams, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe software engineering teams don't have to be 500 people or 1,000 people. Maybe 12 people can build WhatsApp, and that's fine.
The way Elon Musk handled the whole Twitter thing, the company is now 90% less engineering staff than it used to have, and it still functions.
They're not developing anything anymore, right? And
Yeah.
the search experience is broken entirely. And the site is still up historically. I've seen companies where the entire engineering team was fired.
Yeah.
And things kept going. You got a new engineering team who had a somewhat painful onboarding, but generally it was fine. So a lot of wisdom in engineering, in software engineering. Maybe not all of that is true. Like most of it isn't true, and definitely not true in every context. There's no one size fits all wisdom. The question is whether you value or don't value what you're losing. The same about rewriting things, the same about building your own custom components. Maybe for some companies it will make sense to build a platform, but it purely depends on the time, place, and talent that you have. I just saw the news that companies are kicking out all of their SaaS vendors and building AI-based tools to replace it. So like a large part of software engineering was influenced by an organizational model that didn't make sense. Then everybody was trying to make guilds and tribes. At like end of the day, it was like, who cares? Just
Many things require understanding your own context. Does it fit in? What's your understanding or approach to metric driven engineering?
we tried developer analytics historically, and always not great. We had a discussion about Dora recently. I felt the Dora metrics were mostly for banks. Change advisory boards, trouble to release once a month, every change like a commission to production. Once you're deploying multiple times per day or hour, many incidents, it doesn't really make sense to like measure Dora metrics. At that point, they don't say much about what your team is doing. They're that interesting, especially in startup environments where things are fluid. Usually we'll get like people new here talking about things like code review. They're like, shouldn't we refresh code reviews on pull requests every time there's a change? And we're like, then nobody can merge anything anymore. That's not how the velocity of the company works. Or people see our CD workflow, continuous delivery. Every time you merge a pull request, it goes to production. Your decision moment is at the merge moment. When you press merge, you need to be confident this will not break anything. It's a different point of decision, but People are not used to it. It can be uncomfortable. Shouldn't we have an acceptation environment? You're just moving the decision moment to the acceptation environment. Who will decide to promote staging environment to production? Who will that risk and take? Nobody. It's simpler to move it, shift it left to the merge moment. Tell every developer, if you get reviews, check everything and merge, be sure it doesn't break anything. And if it does, that's how modern software engineering is supposed to work.
What metrics are more relevant for a startup? Maybe you could talk about your own, or hypothetically cook up an example and
Based on my priorities, it's simple what metrics I have. Our normalized cost metric is very important for us. Sure, like that we're on the right direction. Our uptime metric is because business needs to be up to serve its customers. Uptime is a trailing metric for everything we do around reliability. For developer experience, our pipeline speed, core things that we own is our delivery pipelines are broken or slow, affects every developer in the company. I think those would be very important metrics. Those are relatively straightforward to measure and say a lot about how things are going. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Do you rely on any external platform or tool for these metrics? So you guys have built something internally. How are you tracking or getting those metrics?
We've looked at something, we're using some developer analytics platforms to give us an external sanity check on whether things are good or not. We're seeing Datadog making it possible to measure more of the software development lifecycle. We're trying to figure out what makes sense for us. Discussions around DORA can be useful. The discussion is more useful than the actual metrics. Change failure rate means something different for every company. Discussions between companies, relatively difficult. Yeah.
This conversation around the reliability of the metrics, when you look at these numbers, how do you approach that? How do you look at cycle times and what are the next steps after getting the number on the cycle time?
You never know what you're seeing, right? A lot of the time, I look at cycle, the pipeline, make sure the dashboard is correct, look into each individual run and see in GitHub Actions whether the dashboard, what is happening.
Yes.
Figuring out how I can slice the dashboard and then look at the individual runs to see going and make it faster. We went from 20 minutes on CI to 10 minutes, and I think that was a big improvement. 20 plus minutes was definitely not acceptable. That's like requires investment, improvements in tooling to bring that down. Lots of caching, of course. Yeah.
So how does the conversation work with these numbers internally? Are these metrics part of the leadership discussion?
Yeah, you can see the conversations between me and my counterparts. They might say things are slow. We're like, what does slow mean? If we have a dashboard to see each team experience, it becomes more productive to talk about. If you don't have the shared truth or experience, it's impossible to do anything. You need shared visibility on the problem. You need to dive into it or ensure progress in the next weeks or months, starting a point that they experience a problem and we see and accept real. Otherwise, there's no possibility of doing anything. Yeah.
Is there any difference in talking about the metrics up versus low? Let's say you're talking to maybe your CTO up and talking to your team. How does the conversation change there?
The higher up you go, the conversation becomes more about principles and how to make it understandable in a simple way. Our leadership understands cycle time well. My CEO understands, speed, cycle time. Those will make us win. So, but it's always you're not going to get people caring about individual GitHub action runs at that point.
I want to move to the cost optimization part. You introduced it earlier. How do we look at it? What does it mean? What does it entail?
We just published an article about our move away from proprietary AWS services like Lambda and Dynamo. And cost-wise, these don't scale for a company at scale towards more commodity services. A lot of these Amazon proprietary services are specific, expensive, and not interchangeable. You're paying a premium for reasons, which may have been good reasons, or at some point you want to stop paying that premium. More people are seeing this across the industry now, that it's perfectly acceptable to run your own servers, deploy to Kubernetes and call it a day, and don't have to deal with niche Amazon services. That's part of the cost story. People are going down the stack, saying, I have a container and I would like to run my container. I don't really care where it is run, as long as it's reliable enough and cheap enough.
What else is there to this discussion?
I don't know what else there is. For me as a platform team, this is where things come together. We have a lot of history to take care of and we need to be ready for the future. The way that will go always, and especially in a platform in every company. You'll have to look at, does it make sense to be in certain technologies? We have to buy and to spend sense. Yeah.
I did get an understanding of what you might be doing day to day.
What I'm doing day to day is being more hands-on. Things are not just my responsibility to fix, but also in my possibility of fixing. I will get into the code myself, will see where the calls are going, dive into Datadog and see how many requests we're getting. No day is the same as another. I don't know how a day to day, it's all very. When we talk about the cost and also just architecture in general, right? We notice if you set things up right, they stay right. If you're deep in a technology you want to get out of, like argue for introducing continuous deployment, that becomes a huge argument. It takes a long time. There's an immense premium on keeping things simple and getting them right from that will have a big effect on how things go. I think that's kind of like something to be tight on, to like just make sure that you don't go dig yourself into a hole. We've dug ourselves out of some holes and we are in a good place now, but it can be a lot of work to ensure that things are future-proof and that developers can develop.
Okay, I might be getting picky here. When you say you want to make things future-proof for developers, can you give me a framework of what it means?
In our case, it means using standard frameworks, cutting a lot of the complexity out of the development process. And that needs to be future-proof enough. We cannot see the future. We know tons of things that we would like to do in the future. Some will be necessary, others may not. Lots of interesting things would help us now and at scale. Future-proofing means, like I said, don't burden yourself unnecessarily because you need it anyway in the future, probably. Any burden you take on now, you will be carrying forever, or 2 to 5 years, which is long enough to forever.
Yeah.
Future-proofing means keeping things lean and simple, so when the future you can change and do things differently. That's very important.
When you're doing cost optimization, how do you balance for R&D?
In a software engineering company, a tech startup, a lot of our cost is R&D. Everything we build is R&D. We're trying to make our product better. How much of that is not R&D is like, it's a difficult question. There's a split between the money we spend on running the service and building the service. A good part will always be R&D because you're always making the product better. Developers are always developing new things, and that's important.
Optimization means doing more with.
You have to work on the most important things and be in continuous conversation with your stakeholders in the business to say, what are these most important things? We think they may be these things, and they may think it's something different. That's reconciliation about what are we working on, move the needle. As a manager, to always do more with less, because you have to get better at things and you create slack in your work. You cannot always be super full and optimize your time. If you're always over scheduled and overburdened, you're doing something wrong or always suffering. That's probably not a good idea. Learning how to do things better means it will take less time, or you will be able to delegate better, or that kind of optimization is always part of the job. Whether you're working on cost, on reliability, or developer experience, it's always a question of doing more with less. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We always have to do more with less because we don't want to spend, if it takes me 4 hours to make a spreadsheet this week, it shouldn't take me 4 hours next week to make the same thing. I automated it. There's so much potential to improve things.
Yeah, I want to cover aspect of your life, engineer by day, but what's happening in the evening and at night and on weekends.
I mean, one of the things that really changed when I became an engineer, a manager, a leader, I also became a parent at the same time. There's a lot of parallels in regulating yourself, making sure that things work and having a perspective. There's also two things that take from the same vessel. The emotional labor of being present, talking to people and being accessible. It's the same with kids as it is at work, because you always have to be talking to people and making sure everybody feels okay. You're not first anymore. The other people come first and you're secondary. I think that's an interesting dynamic. I wanted to explore it. After a long day, you come home and your kids also want a lot from you. In Berlin, swimming, road cycling. I used to do rock climbing, like everybody in technology had to give that up. It was annoying. Otherwise, reading up on technology, learning difficult and weird programming languages. That's I keep busy.
It was amazing talking to you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned for more.